Hi everyone, Pepper Spray Patty here with number 6 of the 10 Commandments of Self-Defense. Today we're talking about set clear boundaries. Now this one's important, one, because it's the one that people forget about the most, and two, because we have been raised in a society where it's okay to put our own feelings aside for other people's feelings. And we talked about this in the fourth commandment. You're responsible for your own feelings, not anyone else's. But this applies also to having your boundaries. We talked about if anyone ever makes you feel uncomfortable, that it's important to say something to them. Remember that some people don't realize when their behavior poses a threat. When I did my self-defense certification training with AWSDA, I was blessed to have several legally blind self-defense instructors in my class with me. And I will tell you that hearing their stories and their experiences was very eye-opening on a lot of things that I had not thought about. For example, many of them talked about experiences where they were waiting at a stop sign or a stoplight, and someone would come up and grab their arm and offer to help walk them across the street. I think about when I was younger, TV shows and commercials representing the Boy Scout helping the elderly lady cross the street. We want to be helpful to other people, but sometimes we need to be cautious of if what we're doing is really helping the other person, or if we're crossing a boundary for them. And even though we have the best of intentions, you have to take into consideration how it makes them feel. So it's always important to ask first before you ever touch anyone. If it's going to be their arm or a hug or anything like that, it's appropriate and should be required that you ask someone first if it's okay. And that's because there are other people who are deliberately testing us to see how far we will let them go. We have to remember, just like when we talked about in number 2, decide in advance whom you're going to fight. You don't know who this person is going to be. It may be a coworker. I don't know about you, but I know I can think back to times where I've had a coworker who was a little too friendly, and would come up behind you and want to rub your shoulders. And I would have to say, I thank you, but I don't want that. It's not okay for you to do that, or it's not, I don't like it. I don't need you to do that. It's, I always thought it was strange when someone would walk up to, why would you walk up to someone and start rubbing their shoulders unless you had an intimate relationship with them? Well, now I realize there's a possibility that, maybe they're just a friendly kind of person, but more than likely there's a possibility that they were testing my boundaries. Now, were they testing my boundaries because they had an attraction to me and wanted to know if I had an attraction to them? Or were they testing my boundaries because they're a predator, and that is a red flag situation? We don't know. We don't know what their intention is. What we do know is how we feel and what our own personal boundaries are. So that's why it's important not only for you to set those boundaries with the people around you, But first and foremost, to know what your boundaries are. What are you okay with? And I recommend that you take a moment and think about what your boundaries are. If you're in the grocery store standing in line and someone starts to talk to you, what are your boundaries on answering to them? A lot of times it depends on what they say. I know for myself, I've had conversations with people in line at the grocery store many times. But there's also been a few times where I did not feel comfortable having a conversation with the person. And so very quickly stated that I did not want to have a conversation, and I turned away and did not give them any more of my attention. It was very clear that my boundary with them doesn't, nope, there's no conversation with you. My boundary is a very large wall. I will fully admit that all of those times it was a man, and I don't know. I don't know if it was his way of flirting with me or if this was a predator looking for a vulnerable victim, someone who doesn't have clear boundaries or is not okay with speaking up for themselves. And I think that that's an important thing to address when we talk about setting clear boundaries. This is a perfect opportunity to make sure that you have your own voice and that you know how to use it. Now, in my self-defense classes, this is the part where we have the exercise where we yell, stop or no really loud. In class, it's the perfect exercise to practice getting your voice. But when it comes to real life, if I'm in line at the grocery store and some guy says something to me and makes me feel uncomfortable, or I have that sense that, this is not someone I want to have a conversation with, or maybe they ask me a question that I don't feel is appropriate, I speak up and I say how I feel. Now, maybe I'm not going to say, hey, listen, you're making me feel like you're creepy. But I'll let them know that I am not comfortable with talking to them and I'm not going to continue this. And I'm assertive with how I say it. And so that exercise of yelling no and yelling stop is what helps you to create that assertive voice within you. So that even when it sounds like, I'm sorry, but I don't have time to have conversation with you right now. Or I'm sorry, I don't feel like having conversation. Or I don't want to have conversation with you. I'd appreciate it if you would step away from my space here and stop bumping into me. Things like that. This is not being a bitch. This is having clear boundaries and letting someone know that they're crossing your boundaries and affecting how you feel. And it's not okay. It's important to tell the person to stop. You can even tell them to go away. If they're too close, tell them to take a step back. That's your space, and you have every right to be comfortable within it, no matter where you are. It's perfectly fine to start in your normal speaking voice. If they get offended, they start to show red flag behavior by raising the volume of their voice in response, or defending themselves, or insulting you, then it's okay to respond in a matching intensity of whatever their voice is. Remember that this isn't a shouting match. State your boundary and then end it. But be aware of what's going on around you. You're simply standing by your boundaries. If they don't respect your request, repeat yourself. Back off. Get away. Until you sound like a broken record. And if you have to, each time you say it a little bit louder. What does that do? That draws attention. And as a predator, that's the last thing that they want is attention. Lastly, I want to say 80% of assaults end with a woman setting a clear verbal boundary. So with that, I want to tell you to make sure that you think about what your boundaries are, what you're okay with, what you're not okay with in different scenarios and situations. And I encourage you to go out and practice your voice. For me, I like to do when I'm driving down the road, roll up the windows in my truck, and I yell, "No! Stop! Stay away!" And I do it in my loudest voice that I possibly can. I didn't do it now because I'm in the house. But find a place where you feel comfortable do that. And continue to do it until it feels natural and it feels good and it feels empowering. That's when you know that you've found your voice. And you don't have to always talk like that, and you don't have to be that person all the time. But when you need to have that assertive voice, when you need to set your boundaries with people, you will have that firm assertiveness to your voice. And that's critical in sending the message and de-escalating a possible situation. I hope this helps and encourages you to learn more in self-defense. Have a safe and wonderful day.